Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk a little bit about drags. I know I did a previous video where I talked about earth anchors and what kind of earth anchors I use and how I kind of prefer the chain on the Fox Hollow Super Stakes versus the cable. Cable's perfectly fine. I've used cable in the past, I just prefer the chain for whatever reason. And so today I thought I'd take a few minutes and talk about drags. Probably 30%, I'm going to guess, maybe somewhere around in that range, 33%, a third basically of my traps have drags on them. And there's a reason for that for me. Number one, where I live in the Ozarks, the ground sometimes is really difficult and really hard. There's a lot of clay, and sometimes it's just almost impossible. There's a lot of shelf rock, a lot of limestone, a lot of bluffs. Sometimes you just cannot put an earth anchor in no matter what. So I will use drags in those areas. And if I am trapping on public land, I will try to use drags in those areas just to try to, especially if I'm going down like Forest Service roads or logging roads and things of that nature, to try to get the animal off of the road or away from the road as much as I can, so it can get in the brush, get hung up, and hopefully no one's going to see it and either shoot it or steal it and then steal my traps. I don't do a lot of trapping on public land that is not maybe like landlocked or next to private land that's very difficult to get to. And I've talked about that in the past. But for those of you that do a lot of public land trapping, I think drags would definitely be something to consider, especially if you're going to be trapping on like Forest Service roads and logging roads and things like that, where you're going to have people driving up and down there, whether they're deer hunting or whatever they're doing, driving around scouting or just driving around drinking beer and shooting at trees or signs or whatever they're doing. Wait, hold it. Does that only happen here in the Ozarks? No, I'm pretty sure it happens other places too. But regardless, you don't want people doing that and then stealing all your catches and stuff. So how do I set up my drags? The first thing I do with drags is, if you've never used drags before, is I always am pretty cautious about wrapping all of my chain around my drag, and then when I store it with the trap on it. And the reason I do that is if you don't do this, you end up with this big giant mess in whatever container you're carrying all your traps in, or the back of your truck, or the back of your UTV, or whatever you're using. And then the chain will get knots in it, and it's a real pain. So I've just learned over the years to just make sure I wrap it all around. And you can set them in there neatly, and then when you need it, you just pull them right out. So take all the chain off here. It's just wrapped around. This is just the way I do it. I've seen guys make little loops out of their chain, kind of like you're wrapping up an extension cord, or kind of like you're wrapping up some rope. Use wire, use ties, use a variety of different things that you can use, but just wrap the chain up somehow. So this is a drag that I bought. I think I bought this one off of Minnesota Trapline. It is just a rebar drag, and as you can tell, it's got the off, one is down and one is up. It's sharpened ends. It's got the little piece out here in the front that keeps stuff from getting, wrapped up in there. And then it's got the little D-ring down here at the bottom, and I've just put a crunch-proof swivel on it. There's any kind of different ways you can hook it onto this, or I've seen guys do it with different ways. This is usually I'll just put a swivel on here because I want several swivel points in here. I also have made a bunch of these drags. I just basically use the Minnesota brand as a go-by and just welded a bunch of these together. They're not super difficult to make, provided you have the heavy-duty rebar. These things are pretty heavy. I've caught plenty of coyotes in them, cats, whatever. Most things don't go 20 feet in these things before they're hung up in either a grass clod or brush. You can also pre-wrap it around a sapling or something, or if there's a big rock or something, you can just throw this up against the rock or behind the rock. A lot of times they'll get caught up in that and never even move when you get there. Coons and foxes hardly ever even move these things. They're pretty heavy. I've never used the saber tooth drags. I know a couple people that have used them. They love them. I just haven't used them just because I haven't needed to buy any more drags. But those would be good ones to use. I have seen some guys use, and I don't know the name of them, but they're like these flat two-prong kind of drags. Boy, I don't know that I trust those things. They just don't seem to be that well made to me. They don't seem to be very heavy, and I just don't know that I would trust them, especially unless I was in a really, really wooded area or something. I know back when I first started trapping in the late 70s and early 80s when I was a kid, we obviously didn't have earth anchors then, and I just used lots of stuff for drags. I used old fence posts, I used big logs, and I just like wired stuff to that. I would never do that now, but when you're a 12-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid, and you don't have any money, you do what you do. But I would never do that now, just because I don't want to take a chance of losing an animal and have it be out there with my trap and stuck in a trap, and I don't think that's fair for me, and it's definitely not fair for the animal. So after this swivel, I have generally about 8 feet, give or take, of chain, 8 to 9 feet usually. This is just number 2 chain you can buy at any trapping supply store. And then I put another crunch proof swivel in right here that I attach to my trap, and then of course there's another crunch proof swivel on the base plate of this MV550. So basically with this system there is 6 swivel points. Now this is an older system and I haven't put my spring in here, but all the new ones that I have, and I don't know why I haven't done this one, I guess it just slipped through the cracks. Generally I will put a J.C. Connor spring right here in the middle of this too. So I'll end up with 2 more swivel points and a spring in here. So that would give me 8 swivel points and a J.C. Connor spring. And with the 8 feet of chain, I've never had anything get away, knock on wood, from me with these drags. And I found them to be really, really productive. So if you've never used drags, don't be scared of them. Some guys, that's all they do is use drags. I've talked to people on my YouTube channel that's all they do. I mean, there's several, trappers that do nothing but use drags. And I'm okay with that. I like to use earth anchors, but I also like to use drags where I can't use earth anchors or in areas where I want to hide my catch. And honestly, sometimes it's just fun to use a drag. It's kind of cool, especially I check my traps a lot of times in the dark before work, and I'll show up, drag's gone, here I am in the dark going and tracking down, whatever I caught. So it's kind of fun, adds a little bit of excitement. It's something different, something that you can use in other places where you can't put an earth anchor. I put a lot of cat sets on drags just because there's a lot of bluffs and stuff here in the Ozarks, and there's a lot of cats around those, and I can never put an earth anchor in there. So I use a lot of drags in those places and in cubbies and things like that. So if you've never used a drag, I would recommend that you give them a try. Just be very responsible with them, just like you would be with your earth anchors, but even more responsible in making sure that your catch isn't going to get away. You're going to have that animal just loose out there with your trap on it. So hope that helps, and give me some comments below if you've used drags or if I'm missing something. Love to hear from you guys. See you later.